G'day, I hope you had a great Labour Day around New Zealand and I hope you backed a winner. Welcome to the Guerin Report on a Monday night as we are still celebrating a wonderful Cox Plate for New Zealand, for James McDonald, for Chris Waller, and of course for our guests on the show last week, the Green and White Army of Yulong. They were first and third in the Cox Plate. Round about here, they were first and second. There's Treasure the moment in front, but the Queen of the Valley, the new Queen of the Valley, that is Via Sistina, surging to the lead and then needing to be so brave to hold off Buckaroo. And there he is, Chris Waller, expat, very proud Kiwi with Charlie Duckworth, heading back to the winner's circle at the Valley, a place they know oh so well. For J-Mac, he becomes only the second jockey in Cox Plate history to win it 4 times. Of course, Huey did it with Winx. J-Mac has done it with 3 different horses, Animo, then into Romantic Warrior, and then this girl. Twice, very different victories last year, winning by 8. This time it took all of J-Mac's persuasion to get her home. Typical J-Mac celebration, involving the crowd and saying, look, we did it, come along for the ride. Congratulations to everybody involved. And of course, as we said, Yulong, they were very popular with that show last week, showing behind the scenes of that giant machine, but very much a New Zealand victory there, Waller and James McDonald. Just on James, he won't be heading to Flemington this week. There's Sam Fairgrave, you saw him on the show last week. He's the racing boss there at Yulong. And there's Jun Zhang, who also joined us last week. So lots of our alumni from the Guerin Report celebrating the Cox Plate win. Just on J-Mac, no Derby Day for him. He has chosen, even though he's a traditionalist and he'd love to be there, to go back to Sydney, to Randwick for the $10 million Golden Eagle. That's how much he thinks of Autumn Glow. So again, J-Mac into Waller with Autumn Glow, unbeaten. He thinks she could be potentially the best horse in Australia. All of those previews coming up over the next 5 days here on Trackside, but that leads in to the really big one. The Melbourne Cup is next Tuesday, and that Cox Plate meeting Friday into Saturday left us with a few questions and a few moving parts to this. One of those is Buckaroo. Buckaroo second in the Cox Plate. He's in the Melbourne Cup market, but he won't be starting at the stage. They're going to head to Champions Day, to what used to be called the McKinnon Stakes, which is on the last day of the carnival in Melbourne. J-Mac signed up to ride Maidan. Now that's at 54 kilos in the Melbourne Cup. That's about a kilo out of the bottom of his comfort zone. But he said, I'm going to make it work. Not a lot of fun for him. No party pies for J-Mac this week as he looks forward to Maidan in the Melbourne Cup. And heading further down, Friday night's Moonee Valley Cup winner, One Smooth Operator, been given a 1 kilo rehandicap, 52 to 53 for the Melbourne Cup. He was well favoured in the race last year. Didn't have a lot of luck. He'll go around with 53 kilos next Tuesday. Let's wind this market through a bit, because we do have still 2 New Zealanders eligible for the Melbourne Cup. One is Mark Twain. You can see him down the bottom. He'll race on Wednesday. Now, his form doesn't look great, but he's been going okay. He sits about 21st in the actual rankings of the ones, once you take out the horses we know aren't going to start. Mark Twain's in the Melbourne Cup. So Roger James and Robert Wellwood and OTI will decide after Wednesday's effort, he'll be on trackside at 6:20 on Wednesday night, whether he will start in the Melbourne Cup. And the other one, of course, is Trav, the Auckland Cup winner. We spoke to Raymond Connors today. He said, if we get in, we're going to go round. So he got wide on the track. It wasn't disastrously bad in the Moonee Valley Cup on Friday night. He was okay. I wouldn't be stunned if he could run top 12 in the Melbourne Cup, but Raymond telling us on the Guerin Report, if we get in, we're going to start. So potentially we have 2 New Zealand entries for the Melbourne Cup, both very long odds, although the toppy at the head of the market, El Rifa, set to carry 59 kgs, and very, very few horses can do that and still be a factor at the back end of a Melbourne Cup. A fascinating next 8 days lies ahead. Talking about the Melbourne Cup, the best New Zealand's trainer in the last decade at getting horses into the Melbourne Cup is this man, Andrew Forsman. Of course, he's won a Caulfield Cup. He probably could have won the Melbourne Cup with training partner Murray Baker had it not been for the colic that affected Mongolian Khan. He's also one of our best trainers here in New Zealand, and we're getting into Cup Week coming up shortly in Christchurch. He's won multiple 2,000 guineas, an outstanding trainer and a very good racing brain. So we wanted to talk to one of the local boys, not long after he won his 1,000th domestic race, about what affects him. What are the young trainers like him and Marsh and Wellwood and all of these type of people, Sam Burgess, what are they thinking about all these changes in New Zealand racing and what matters most to them? We sat down with Andrew Forsman. Well, Andrew, it's good to have a chat. Carnivals are in full swing now in Australia and they're very close to starting in New Zealand.
Yes.
You've had enormous success at that time of the year in both countries, in 2,000 guineas races and Caulfield Cups and in derbies. Does the change of the racing calendar mean that, for example, winning a race during Melbourne Cup week doesn't mean quite as much as it did 10 or 15 years ago?
Not from my perspective. I think maybe from afar it does because there's so much else going on. But when you're in Melbourne and you're immersed in what's going on during that time of the year, I love it. That's my favourite time of the year. Spring in Melbourne, you've got obviously good sport going on. That leads into sort of AFL finishes. Then the racing takes over and it's like a whole town, I suppose, which is the size of, or the city the size of our country, gets right behind the racing, and it's a brilliant thing to be a part of.
Is the word carnival changing? Because it feels like from the time you roll through Christchurch and we have Group 1 racing here and then all of a sudden Christmas and then we get into Karaka Millions and before that's Magic Millions and now there's a new Champions Day. Do the targets that somebody like you or when you were training with Murray used to aim at 10 or 15 years ago, are they now spread over 6 months?
Yeah, you're right. The calendar's changed, particularly for age group horses, 3-year-olds. I think that's a positive. Change is good. We can't just expect to do what we have done for the last 20 or 30 years and not progress. I think obviously the competition for the gambling dollar is so much greater now, and we need to realise that as an industry, and if that means keeping things more current and consistent and not having such a lull between, say, carnivals, I think that's got to be a good thing.
We're coming up to the Melbourne Cup, and 10 years ago, you in training with Murray were in the very rare position of having the favourite for the Melbourne Cup because Mongolian Khan won the Caulfield Cup, and then he got colic, I think, and you had that taken away from you. Is it one of those things you look back on and think that was our chance to win a Melbourne Cup? Because you've been up there a few times since. Is it feeling like with the European and Japanese invaders, those chances are getting further away?
It does, since the Mongolian Khan sort of era, I suppose. Post then, I think the Cup's just become more and more competitive. Probably the good Europeans come down and they're probably quite well weighted against our progressive staying type of horses. They don't have the same grounding, they haven't been trained the same way, they are very hard to beat. That's not a negative, I don't think, for the race. It just makes it harder. Look at Very Elegant as an example. Even in a relatively current era, she was still good enough and she came from here to go there and win. I just think it makes it more of a challenge, to be honest.
Do you think we're still breeding horses good enough to win Melbourne Cups? Because we're breeding horses who can get into them. Are they good enough to win them?
I think they are. And I think she's a recent current example. It's just become harder. So it's not going to happen every second or third year or as regularly as it did 20 or 30 years ago. We just have to accept that that's not going to be how it is anymore. It
feels like training or the way stables are made up is changing a lot in front of our face. And Murray Baker, of course, your former training partner and long-time mentor, retired 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Do you still have many of those owners from that partnership? Are those days of 1 or 2 people racing horses together still part of Andrew Forsman racing?
A few, but definitely not as many. I think the landscape is changing for sure. It's pretty evident now that there's the shift has changed, and that's just because of rising cost, I suppose, and it's become harder for those single owners to race horses.
We've seen in the last 10 years changes in the premiership, and some of the major stables, obviously Te Akau, are syndicate-based stables. Is that something you have considered as a trainer, as an I'll set up my own syndicates, or is that running two separate businesses at the same time? Are you better off externalising that and trying to get other syndicate horses into your stable?
From my point of view and the scale that I operate at, for now, I think dealing with an OTI or a My Racehorse or a syndication company like that is much more preferable, that they give me the horse to train. I just concentrate on training the horse. Going to the yearling sales and putting your neck on the line financially is the scary thing, and it's not something I enjoy doing. I love selecting the horses. Trying to sell them is certainly not my forte. So from my point of view, and we only ever have 60 in work at one time, we're not trying to get to 100 or 150. So we do have a good core group of owners, and then I guess the syndication side of it comes in behind that.
You talk about the sales, and you have had a very good record of buying horses at the sales, not for a lot of money, but one of the best examples being a horse like Agon. What do you look for, away from price, what do you look for at the sales? Is it the page, is it the walk, is it the athlete? What's made you good at this?
Good question. I think pedigree is very important, and it doesn't have to be the flashiest, most informed sire as such, but if there's something there on the dam side, I'm a big fan of a dam sire or second dam sire. Families you've been familiar with, I know a lot of trainers go down that path, but if you see traits in horses that you've dealt with before come through in certain horses, I think that counts for a lot.
Is it easier to train them if you know the family?
Not so much easier to train them. I think we train every horse the same. It's more you know the qualities to look for in a good horse, or a good horse from that family. If you see similarities, I think that helps.
You spent a lot of time in Melbourne. You still have a small stable in Melbourne, but you've bounced around between Melbourne and Queensland and New South Wales with great success in the last 10 or 15 years. Stake money aside, when you're there, what's the biggest difference you notice between Australian racing, predominantly Melbourne these days, and New Zealand racing?
Well, obviously culture is probably what underpins the whole thing, in that the Aussies love a bet. They love to gamble. They get behind racing, and so that, I think, flows on to the fact that it's held in high regard and it's considered a proper sport. They love to bet on it, and I think that flows on to having quality jockeys, quality trainers, the investments there, obviously, and then your racetracks are of a good standard as well.
Do you feel that's missing here? Because Ellerslie feels like it's really good, and it doesn't feel much different from Randwick to me as a place. But do you feel a difference in the culture when you're walking around at racetracks?
Not when you're walking around, no. But I think what ATR have done has been fantastic, and thankfully we're 7 years on from the Massara report, and what they've done with their track and upgrading their facilities has been brilliant.
See, when I go to Ellerslie, it feels a little bit like Randwick to me. Are we getting there? Are we getting closer? Or is the culture more of a wider societal thing we're talking about?
I think it is. That's what I was referring to as a societal thing. But I think what Ellerslie have done, or ATR have done, has been amazing. It's what we desperately needed and what we've now got, thankfully. The facilities are world class. You step on there and you feel like you're at a proper event, like a proper racecourse where you're looked after, you're catered for, and the horses have a good track to gallop on.
You are still in a very young phase of your career, and there's a lot of guys in Cambridge who are in the same place, and a Sam Burgess and type guy at Matamata. How important is Ellerslie to you guys in keeping you here and not wanting people to become the next Bjorn Baker who disappears to Australia?
Well, I guess if it wasn't for Ellerslie and what they did and how they acted so promptly, that was great. They were communicative right the way through when they were putting all those things in place. Yes, they had to sell the hill, but they've done it, I believe, for the greater good. And if it wasn't for that, I'd be really concerned as to where we're at as an industry.
Do you find that at Cambridge on a Tuesday morning there's more excitement about an Ellerslie Saturday round the corner than maybe some of the other tracks you're going to?
Absolutely. Like I said, you turn up to Ellerslie, you feel like you're at a proper event, and that's what we need to sell our industry as. We need to actually make it a product that can be respected on the world stage.
This is an interesting question because it involves parochialism. I think everybody wants racing around the entire country to be strong, but we are seeing the drift of some races north to Ellerslie, and as unbiasedly as possible, it seems to be helping field strength and size. Would you like to see Group 1s right around the country, or would you prefer to see the majority of them at Ellerslie?
Well, while Ellerslie being one of the best, or one of the only best facilities we have in the country, I believe that's where we should be. And if that means we get a better field, it's closer to the bulk of the horse population, it just makes sense. We can't hold on to, I guess, what's happened in the past and look back historically and say, well, we've always done this. We need to get together as an industry and realise what's actually going to work. And these changes will be tried. And if they work, great. Some of them won't, and they may go back to where they were. Who knows? But I think unless you try something and you're willing to change, you're not going to progress.
You mentioned Ellerslie being a success. There's a lot of talk about a greenfields project here in the Waikato. Are you a supporter of that idea?
Absolutely. I think it's the best thing that could happen, and the sooner the better. But also understanding that the task they've taken on in trying to create a greenfields project here is a lot different to what Ellerslie had to do. They already had the land, they were set up, they just had to put in a new track. So I think trying to buy a plot of land where it needs to be has been and will be very difficult, but if they can get it over the line, whatever it takes, I think if they can manage it, we can make it work as an industry, and it would be brilliant.
What are the basics they need to get right? For example, I went to Singapore last year for the last meeting, and you had vet clinics on the complex, which seems like something which could work. What are things that a greenfields needs to have for a trainer?
Look, just obviously a variety of tracks, but for a trainer, I think in Cambridge, where we are currently, we've got the right sort of tracks. If you could replicate similar sort of tracks and surfaces there, I think that's quite easy to get right. Obviously having a course proper of a standard of Ellerslie, like a world class, like a Sharton, something that can take a lot of rain but still race properly, I think is important. So you've got the consistency of product. I think that's the real key. If we're going to put our best racing out there to an international audience, it has to look good.
You and your family live not too far from the current Cambridge track on a personal level, because horse trainers are humans. Does it bother you that the track might be moving 30 or 40 kilometres away?
Not at all. We have to adapt. Like I say, we have to do what's best, and I feel like the right people are in the right places. We just need to really make it happen now, and I think it can only be a positive.
I want to talk to you about something a lot of people probably never get a chance to actually talk to their trainers about, and that's bills. Training bills are going up, no doubts about that, but a lot of trainers, not all, but a lot of trainers tell me they're not making any money. So how does that work?
Good question. Costs have gone up, basically.
All costs?
Yeah, minimum wage, cost of shavings to put in a horse's box, cost of your hay, cost of your feed. So what it costs us to supply the product, we have to charge, and all we're doing is charging a cost as trainers. Some people will feed more expensive feed, or they'll do something more expensive than others, but when you sit down with your accountant at the end of the year and the bottom line is, he says, you're not charging enough for training fees, you have to go up. You can't lose money on training fees.
Is it a stake's going to help that, or is it still, for somebody like you, the sale or the percentages of a sale are the cream on the cake?
That's very important. If we sell a horse and we lose it, essentially you're losing a promising horse. You have to profit from that. And I've sold a couple of my own recently. That's something you have to do. Trading is very important. We produce a very good product, so we have that ability to trade, and obviously with stake money, that's how we make money, is selling horses and winning stake money.
You have invested your life and your family's life into training horses. Do you feel like the bosses of New Zealand racing talk to you or listen to you enough, whether that's NZTR, the TAB, Entain, Auckland Thoroughbred Racing, whoever, Cambridge? Do they pay enough attention to the people who actually make it work?
Possibly not, but it's also a hard one. Like trying to get you've got a group of trainers in the room and ask them what could be improved or what they'd prefer to see happen. It'd be like herding cats. You wouldn't get anyone to ever agree on one consistent theme of things. So I understand in that regard why they don't come to us directly and ask what we want. We have mediums to get those points across. So I think the relationship's good.
Do you think the Trainers Association actually works? Do you reckon that governance structure works?
And again, that's a hard one. I think we can only get together as a group. We like to think you're representative of the group of trainers, but again, getting everyone to agree on what's actually important is the hard thing, and sometimes that probably doesn't come across as well as we could get it across.
Well, I suppose technically you're also all competitors as well. You still want different.
Yep.
You're separate businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about the struggles of administration and the herding of cats. We are very lucky to have a racing minister who seems to care about racing, and he has an advisory committee behind him now of some of the most knowledgeable people in New Zealand racing. Is that something you feel comfortable about, knowing there's people you can talk to who may eventually have his ear?
I think it's a great thing. I think it's been desperately needed. You look at the quality of the people on that advisory board. They're the sort of people we should be looking to lead our industry. They're successful business people. I mean, if we can't trust them to have our best interests at heart, I don't think we can trust anyone. And I love the fact that Winston has been so supportive of us. Who knows how long we're going to have him, and we need to really utilise that group of people while we have them.
You're a smart guy, so I'm going to ask you this question, even though I don't typically talk about politics much. Do you reckon there's some sense in people in racing block voting for New Zealand First? I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but I've thought to myself in the past, doesn't that make sense to keep what appears to be the only politician in the country who really cares about racing in power?
It's in our best interest, so it's probably not the dumbest idea.
You're coming up to summer. I'm sure you're going to have some black type winners over the next 4 or 5 or 6 months. When people look at your training, and you've been consistently very good for a long time, how would you describe it? I mean, people tend to think of certain stables as being good at certain things. What would be your key training philosophy?
Probably just being consistent, and that's what I obviously learnt off working with and under Murray for a long time, is just the consistency, not getting a horse that might show above average ability, then you start to change things up, or you're a little bit too scared to do this with them, or a bit too scared to do that. I think you just treat each horse the same. The good ones will put their hand up, and then you can obviously train them accordingly. Has how you trained changed in the last 15 years? Because it feels like racing's changed a bit. It has a bit. Probably a lot in tactics. I remember when I first started working for Murray, he'd like his horses ridden quietly and off the speed. And I think there's a real trend now toward racing on faster tracks and in a more competitive, perhaps, environment, that there's a real play to have your horses put in the race, and that really helps. I think if you've got the ability to have a jockey on that's willing to put them in the race and give them their chance, that's a huge advantage. And I think you'll win a lot more races doing that. You've been at the top of New Zealand racing now and seen a lot of change in the last 10 years. Are you more confident about its future now than you were 5 years ago? Oh, very much so. What Entain have done, they've really given us a great impetus. Now, us as an industry now, the timing is very crucial that we get together, follow the right people and do the right thing. As you can see, Andrew's a very deep thinker, not only about his own horses, about what matters to those youngsters or younger trainers in New Zealand racing as we head forward with such an interesting time around the Ellerslie developments, which have now gone ahead and helped the game so much. What happens next in the Waikato, and what really matters to them, because so many of them have so much money in their futures and their families' futures invested in the game. We wish him the best of luck over the next couple of weeks. One place I know I'll be seeing him, and plenty of our viewers will too, is at the ready-to-run sales. They're coming up at Karaka in an unusual situation this year. They are actually on during New Zealand Cup week. So New Zealand Cup week starts, we roll in through the gallops and the trotting cup on the Tuesday. Then the ready-to-run sales start Wednesday and Thursday. So that's the 12th and 13th of November.
at Karaka. Now, the reason for that is because of a few other events in Auckland the following week, we couldn't quite get enough accommodation to get everybody here and make it work the next week. And we had to come back a day because it was going to be Thursday and Friday, but they're racing at Sha Tin in Hong Kong on the Saturday. And NZB knows how important those Hong Kong trainers and owners are to the week. They wanted to give them the opportunity to get home to race. So the best thing they could do commercially for the ready-to-run sale to get the majority of the buyers there is Wednesday and Thursday. The Breeze Ups also had a bit of a change of calendar because they were supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but it rained so much in the Waikato, they changed it and moved it back a week. And it was a really, really smart decision from NZB. They worked with Te Rapa, they got the helicopter out to dry out the track, and we had some really good breeze action last Monday and Tuesday. We'll look at some of those. It was a slightly different type of breeze-up situation because the track was soft both days and it was quite windy. So this is from NZB. This has nothing to do with us on the Guerin Report. They've sent us these horses because they went quick. This is a pair from Riversley Park. You're looking at the horse on the inside, lot 110. It's by Bivouac and it breezed in 10-2-7. So that's really quick, considering the track was actually softer than it usually is for the breezes. Here's one by Tissot. This is on the second day. Again, it was soft. There was a crosswind. It breezed in 10.3. So that's going quick. We're seeing a lot more quick breeze horses. And here's a 10.31. I think this was on the first day. This is a Hukia, who again are very, very good vendors. You're looking for the horse on the outside. It's by Capitalist, and it breezed in around 10, or exactly 10.31. So what we saw was, because of the wind and the softer tracks, the breezes were maybe about 0.2 of a second, on some occasions 0.3 of a second, slower than they would have been, say, in previous years. But on the whole, some really fast breezes, a lot of well-bred stock going under the hammer, and in the preparation with some of the new vendors coming on board as well, really, really strong. Speaking to Andrew Seabrook from New Zealand Bloodstock, they are very confident they are getting the right Hong Kong-based owners to come down. They're also getting lots of interest from Australia, as you would expect, because the ready-to-run produced Char Wolf, horses like Mr. Brightside went there. Plenty of wonderful horses who have won Group 1s in Australia came through that process. So they're available on nzb.co.nz. They'll also be shown on Trackside. I'll just give you a warning, it's a bit like eating potato chips. Once you watch one, you might end up watching 20 or 30 or 40. They're pretty addictive watching those breeze ups, but some really nice horses. Heading to Karaka, as I said, change your date, November 12 and November 13, and there'll be huge coverage of that live on both days. Good luck to everybody who's taking a horse there, or in fact, if you're shopping at Karaka for the ready-to-runs. Okay, we have the week off next Monday for the Guerin Report. Don't worry, we're not being lazy. We just wanted to give Trackside more room to preview the Melbourne Cup. It's the big one of the year, so therefore next Monday will be taken up by that preview. The week after, we head to Christchurch for Cup Week, and it's the night before the New Zealand Trotting Cup. So what we're going to do is talk to one of the greats of New Zealand harness. It's very rare to have an in-depth interview with Mark Purdon. We get right into his brain, talk about so many of the factors in his life, what New Zealand Cup Week means to him, and a few surprises. That's our next Guerin Report coming up on Trackside and trackside.co.nz on New Zealand Trotting Cup Eve. Between now and then, there are so many big races coming up. Good luck to everybody involved. And of course, the Melbourne Cup and the Melbourne Cup Carnival to be previewed enormously here on Trackside over the next week or so. Good luck if you're having a punt. We look forward to seeing you back on Trackside and trackside.co.nz on November the 10th.